My mission in the Philippines. At first we stayed temporarily with an American missionary family in the Manila area that we had the chance to meet during our travels. A few weeks later we were celebrating someone's birthday, and many people came from the surrounding areas to the party, mostly missionaries and volunteers. It was there that I met my wife, but there was only one problem. I couldn't speak a word of English back then, so I asked my friend Stefano to write the words in English for me on a piece of paper to give to her, asking if I could take her out to see a movie sometimes. Stefano was already living together with a local woman in a small town nearby. After 2 months, Kate and I decided to get married and move away from the big city and go to live with Stefano and his wife in the countryside where life was more tranquil. We were expecting our first child, life was good, and our neighbors liked us very much. Kate's pregnancy was not an easy one, so she needed to take extra rest for most of her pregnancy. But we had a beautiful baby boy, and then next a lovely girl, who was also born in the Philippines. Our volunteer work consisted mostly in the poor villages areas, where most of the inhabitants were fishermen living in bamboo huts. We made a friend at the fish market, Antonio. He would sell all kinds of big fish, sometimes up to 10 to 20 pounds each, mostly tuna. He had men who were fishing for him all night in his boat, and in the morning he would sell the fish at the market. Stefano's wife was a Philippine national, so could speak Tagalog with the village people. I could never understand Antonio. He wasn't a rich man at all, but every time we would come to the market to say hello, he would prepare a big tuna fish and give it to us. We became very close to him and his family, and from time to time we would visit him in his home beside the sea where all the families of fishermen lived. Stefano's wife would tell stories to the many children gathering around us, for there was always a large crowd of them wherever we went, for they hardly ever had seen white people, especially a 2-year-old boy, entering their place. Days later we went to see Antonio at the market, and we noticed that he had no more fish left to sell, and so he gave some money to one of his men and told him something in Tagalog. The man came back minutes later with a big tuna for us. Antonio was an incredibly loving man with a big heart. One time during the typhoon season something terrible happened. A big typhoon struck right in the village, destroying many houses. Lots of people were affected by this, and not everyone had the money to rebuild. It was all over the news. We wanted to do something to help, but we were not in a good position, financially, to do so. But my wife and I thought of the next best thing: to go to the big city of Manila and rally financial support from big corporations and institutions on behalf of the village people. This wasn't an easy undertaking as it may seem. We lived 12 hours away from Manila and had no transportation to get around, so my wife and I and our 2-year-old boy were soon to go for a very bumpy ride. We stayed the first night with our friends in the city of Manila. The next morning, I started to look at the phone book, and my eyes fell on this large food manufacturer not too far from us, and after consulting with Kate, we decided to give it a try and see what happens. We took a local bus and arrived at the industry. The guard at the gate let us through, and we came to one of the offices. One of the secretaries came to talk to us and asked how they could help us. I asked to see the CEO of the company, but without an appointment she wouldn't even allow us to talk to him on the phone. I tried insisting several times, saying that it was important, but to no avail. We had no choice but to leave. Out on the main road we decided to hitchhike instead of waiting for the bus. A Mercedes-Benz stopped right in front of us to give us a ride. I spontaneously started talking to the driver about their beautiful country and its wonderful people of the Philippines. He wanted to know what we were doing there at the place. I tried to explain to him that they wouldn't let us see the CEO of the company because we didn't make an appointment. Curious, he kept asking what we wanted or needed with him. I had no choice but to tell him the whole story. We had wanted to know if their company would like to make a contribution in food to a village that had just been stricken by the typhoon. He looked at me perplexed, and out of nowhere I asked him if he believed in God. With a big smile he said he did, but this whole situation was so bizarre to him because he was the CEO that we had come to see without an appointment, and here we were talking with him. Honestly, if I had not been a believer already, this certainly would have made me one. We soon arranged that we would come the next day and pick up whatever we needed. Next morning the same secretary saw us coming, and assuming that we probably still didn't have an appointment, she tried to stop us. I explained to her that the person we were trying to see expected us, and all she had to do was get him on the phone. We spoke on the phone, and a short while later a worker came driving a machine with a load of food, asking me where our truck was. I told him to bring the food to the street corner, and he brought us 2 pallets of a variety of merchandise. Now we had another small problem to take care of. How in heaven will I be able to bring all this good food to a town which is 12 hours away without a truck? My wife and I prayed for God to help us, because we only had just enough money to get a bus back home. I didn't want her and the baby to stick around in the hot sun while I tried to figure out what to do, so I suggested for her to go ahead and take the bus and I would meet her at home. People were driving by, sometimes smiling, probably wondering what was this young foreigner doing hitchhiking on the sidewalk with a mountain of food. Surprisingly, an empty Jeep stopped and asked me where I needed to go, and I explained I needed to go to the bus station. He told me it's no problem, thinking that he's going to get paid a lot of money from a rich tourist. I explained to him my situation the best I could, that I had enough money to pay for my bus fare to get home, but not to pay for the jeep and the transport of goods. I explained that I could pay him in food instead, telling him that the company had just donated the food for people in need. He understood and wanted to help me, God bless his heart, and then drove me right to the main bus station. At the bus stop I bought my ticket just for me, but not for the food I wanted to get it transported, but then again I had to talk to the bus conductor and convince him I could put all this food underneath in the bus storage, for which normally I would have had to pay extra, but I hadn't. After I explained to him what it was all for, he too felt compassionate and allowed me to load it on the bus. I had boxes in every little space I could find, even on the back seats, with more than 1,000 eyes looking at me, with incredible smiles. One of the greatest shows on earth. Finally, when the loading of goods was all completed, I was so happy that I could finally lay back on my seat and relax, thanking God that it was over. One can only wonder, how could I do what I did, and what motivated me to push myself to such extremes? What a great life it was, living in a place where the sun shines most of the time, and where people still consider hospitality and kindness to strangers a great virtue. Occasionally I would take my family on boat trips to different small islands of the Philippines. It was adventurous and sometimes dangerous too, because of the boats often being overloaded, and of the dangerous sea waves that sometimes would sink ships. Being in our early 20s we didn't think too much of danger, so we went many places, and I would be lying if I said that in some situations sometimes we didn't feel any fear, but we survived the ordeal of big waves and arrived safely to the islands. This particular place was a marble town, houses made mostly of marble instead of bamboo. Even some of the streets were made of marble instead of asphalt. I guess that the town probably had so much marble that the people didn't know what to do with it. Usually when we arrived at a new village or town, we would meet with the captain of that barrio or the mayor of the town, to inform them that we would be visiting some of the schools in order for Kate to tell some of the famous Bible stories to the students. They enjoyed meeting with us and welcoming us in their homes as if we were family or old friends. Often we would stay at their place as guests for a night or two, since sometimes there were no hotels in those places, and people would ask us where we were staying, which my answer was that we don't know yet, and so they would invite us to stay with them. During the 5 years we spent away from the West we almost forgot what junk food tasted like, as all we ate were fresh fruits and vegetables, with rice and fish and sometimes chicken or beef when we could afford it. We were fit, and with all the moving around I was always hungry at night, but I would usually have a little snack around 8 p.m. which consisted of a piece of lemon pie that Kate would make, or just rice and milk before going to bed around 10 p.m. We had to maintain a tight schedule and a healthy lifestyle in order to do a good work for the Lord. We experienced living in a community situation for a while with other families, and it was great in many ways. To be around people who felt like we did, it can be very uplifting, and it has its own advantages and disadvantages. It can make life quite easy to share responsibilities where each one carries part of the load, but when those in charge become power-hungry, which can happen to anyone who's given that kind of position in life, then it can become quite unbearable for those living under the same roof. My duty in the community consisted of going on the road most of the time for a period of 5 to 8 days, and then I would come home, rest a few days and go out again. I lead my own team of people. Our goal was to follow up on old friends who were sympathetic to our cause, and we sold our books and materials for donations as a form of income to help pay the bills and expenses of the community, which was perfectly fine with me up to a point. It is a gift that God has given me to connect with people, I know that, and never did I complain about it, except for this once. After being away for more than a week I came home, but Kate, my wife, happened to have gone to a women's meeting out of town for a few days. When she came home and I was so happy to see her and thought we would spend time together. I was asked by the leader of the community to go on the road again for another 10 days, which I willingly accepted. Later on, when I came back home after 10 days on the road, I discovered that Kate and my 2 little children were confined to their room in quarantine for a little fever they had. The community had very strict rules that we all agreed upon, that if one was sick they had to stay confined in their room until they felt better. But my dilemma was that I didn't really want to go back on the road again without seeing and spending time with my family first. I had missed them so much and they missed me, and my kids couldn't understand why I couldn't see them. So it suddenly turned into a big argument with the wife of the man who was in charge of the place. He wasn't home at that time, so I had to deal with the emotions of a woman who would not listen to logic. Then I got so fed up about the whole thing that I chose to quarantine myself and join my family. This power-hungry woman became furious that I had defied her in front of everyone. She gave orders to everyone in the home to take me by force and throw me out of the house, telling me to never come back again. Several people took me half naked, tying me with a rope even though I wasn't resisting, and like a sack of potato carrying me to the gate and putting me out on the street as if I meant nothing. Bringing some of my clothes in a bag and tossing it over the high wall of the property. All the neighbors came out to see what was happening. I was crying, banging on the door asking for my wife, and the police then came and started asking questions. They rang the doorbell, and when those people came out, they were telling the local police that I was drunk and that I went crazy, which was a big lie, of course. I have never been drunk in my entire life, not to mention that there were strict rules in the community about drinking. A glass of wine was usually allowed on special occasions only. Since no one was hurt, the police had no choice but to put me in a room at a hotel. That night, I didn't sleep, not even for a minute. How could God allow this to happen? And how could religious people act so contrary to Christian principles? I was shaking, way down to my bones, feeling close to losing my mind if I couldn't get my family back. I could not lose my family, even if it meant for me to sit out on the doorsteps and wait for the rest of my life for them to come out. The next morning, I left the hotel room which the police had paid for me since I had no money on me, and I walked to the house, rang the bell and waited for someone to come out. After a few minutes someone responded and told me to wait a bit, because my wife and kids were packing and would be joining me shortly. I was completely broken, but happy that things worked out the way it did. We didn't plan to stay this long in the Philippines, but after 5 years been in the country and after what just happened that day, Kate and I decided that it was time for us to make some changes. It was either Italy or Canada, but we decided to go to her birthplace, Canada, so that at the same time I could go through the process of becoming a Canadian citizen myself. Kate's parents paid for our tickets and we arrived in Canada in the winter of 1986 in t-shirts with no winter clothes, and with only $100 to our name. Canada Christmas 1986. It took us a while to get adjusted to all the changes, but when you had as little as we did, things could only get better. We took things slowly, and with the help of the government and some good friends, we were able to find a home and get some second-hand winter clothing to keep us warm. We lived pretty much an ordinary life here in Canada, taking care of our family, for which by this time had grown to 7 members, 3 boys and 2 girls. I did some odd jobs here and there. I had no skills or education of any kind to get a well-paid job. The only thing I knew how to do well was talking with people, and I didn't even consider myself to be a good salesman either, because I was too honest for that kind of job. I knew how to take care of my family and provide for them, so we were never in a situation of want. I went fishing and hunting with friends at times, and enjoyed doing many of the things I never had done yet in life, but that didn't mean that I stopped praying and reading the Bible. God was on my mind every single day. Here in North America, as well as in other rich countries, materialism and money can often take the place of God in your heart, replacing faith with worldly desires, and then automatically you feel lost and empty inside. Dominican Republic 2000. My wife Kate wasn't very different than me, and she too loved God, and wanted to do all she could to help others to find His love. In the year 2000 she had a desire to go to the Dominican Republic. I cherished the idea, and we bought tickets for all 7 of us. We had one contact once there that we'd gotten from a Christian man from Toronto, Canada, who went there regularly, who had said that he had an apartment there which we could use for a month to get started. We arrived in the country at 2 a.m. and by the time we found and entered the apartment it was around 3 a.m. I felt sorry for my little ones, as they had never seen lizards and spiders on the ceiling of a house before. It was a very high ceiling and we could do nothing about it, so we had to move the beds away from the wall and leave all the lights on, praying that those creatures wouldn't crawl on us during the night while we were asleep. We were awakened at sunrise by a donkey and roosters who happened to be living next to the house. Later in the day we discovered that we had no more water, because we failed to fill the cistern at 5 a.m. in the morning. That was the rule. Every day, if we wanted any water, someone had to get up from bed and walk half a mile to open the valve, before the other homes in the area would open their valves and the water would run out. The water system belonged to the house we stayed in, but still people would come to get the needed water, so we had to be smarter about it, and get there before anyone else did, or we would be without water the whole day. Kate was the one doing it, God bless her soul. I liked to sleep a bit longer in the morning. She would faithfully get up at 5 a.m. to make sure to open that valve, so that we would have enough water to do the dishes, wash the clothes, and have a nice cooked breakfast, which consisted of eggs and rice, or fruit and biscuits that she made. My responsibility in the home was simple. I would spend most of my days out finding the best deals for our food consumption. We liked to buy most things in big quantities to last us at least a month. I also would try to meet local people and tourists alike, continuing my spiritual work for the Lord. I could only communicate with those who spoke English or Italian because at that time I didn't speak Spanish yet. The Dominican Republic is a Christian country, and you see signs of Jesus everywhere, and it is quite common to find people grouping in houses for prayer, singing and reading scriptures. Often we would be invited to visit their houses of worship, either to listen or say something if we wanted to. One pastor liked us very much, and after he found out that I had been a missionary and had knowledge of the Bible, he asked me if I could take over his little church so he could go back to his own village in the mountains where he was starting a new church. It was a small congregation of no more than 25 people, and everyone was more than happy having us with them. I had to prepare a sermon for Sundays and give a Bible study during the week for those who wanted to attend. I was different from everyone they had met before, that's for sure. I taught of nonconformist ways to have a bond with God, based on love not fear. I remember one time I was asked this question from one of the members of the church. Joseph, what must I do in order to become more spiritual and have a better relationship with God? I thought for a moment and then I replied, do you really want to be more spiritual? Then you must do this one thing each morning without failing. Can you do it? He replied, yes. What is it? I said, remember tomorrow morning, after you wake up and before you go to work, don't forget to take out the garbage for your wife. At first there was silence, but soon after everyone started laughing out loud. You see, what I learned as being spiritual is not being on your knees most of the day praying while your kids are screaming, because breakfast is not yet ready and there is work to be done. Spirituality for me is to be aware of your surroundings and be of help when needed. But there is also a time to pray, and that we must not forget. Yes, I had very good teachers in my life, therefore most people enjoyed listening to me when I talk. I made friends with some foreigners who had established themselves there. Some of them owned successful businesses like hotels and restaurants and jewelry stores. A rich millionaire who I'd become friends with, whenever I would come to see him at his hotel, he would invite me for dinner and introduce me to some of his closest friends who came from all over the world. These were very well-placed people in society, developers, doctors, lawyers, and were wealthy people, and yet they were glad to hear me speak. Surprised that I had come to the Dominican Republic with my wife and 5 children to work for God without anyone paying me for it. Then, I heard that my good friend at the hotel was quite sick and I wasn't able to see him for a while. One day I decided that I would go to see him, and we sat down to have a little talk together. I don't remember exactly what it was that he had, but I think it was quite serious, because he offered me a huge amount of money if I would pray and intercede to God for him, so that he would be healed. I explained to him that you can't buy God's favors with money. He loves you, just you, and will help you if you only ask and believe. I tried to make him understand, but unfortunately it was hard for him to grasp the concept of God's grace and free gift of salvation. All his life he had to pay for everything and couldn't accept the fact that someone would give him anything for free. The members of our church too at one point wanted to donate money for our ministry, but I had to refuse it also, because the last thing I wanted in life was to see dollar signs in my eyes instead of the souls who needed Jesus. We didn't have a whole lot, so I explained that if they wanted to help us, maybe they could sometimes bring us fruits or chip in for our rent if they wanted to, but don't give us any money please. Soon we had to move out from our apartment because the place where we had stayed was reserved for other people. We were really praying that we would find a place that we could afford, when an American Christian family who were owners of a big land with a few cottages on their property offered us a place without paying anything. At first I was so excited about it, Kate and I started to pack the few things we had in order to move the next day. But that night we went to their place to finalize the situation, and I asked if we could say a little prayer. After we finished praying, the lady owner explained to me that I would have to work on the property fixing things in order to pay for our rent. Well, that changed everything. If I was to do that, I knew that I wouldn't have any time left to do my spiritual work that I had come there for. So in disappointment we declined the offer. Eventually we found a very nice place to rent, not too expensive, on the 2nd floor where one of the families we knew already lived. What's very interesting is what happened a few weeks later. That house, that we had originally wanted to move into but had decided not to, was robbed, and everyone got tied up with ropes by bandits demanding money from the hostages. Fortunately no one was hurt, but as I was told afterwards, it was a very traumatic experience for them all. I can't say that I wasn't ever tempted with the ways of the world sometimes too. I had met this man and I kind of trusted him to be an honest man. He worked most of his life as a manager of a food supermarket, and had put quite a bit of money aside in order to buy the business from his old boss. But he asked me if I wanted to go in partnership with him to buy the supermarket. I thought about it, and I was convinced that it was a good idea, because he was already working there and showed me the records of all the money we could be making if we owned the store. The money for us to invest was all we had, and if something would have gone wrong we would have been in real trouble. But he assured me that it was a sure thing and that we had nothing to worry about. I talked with Kate about it and she was against it. I tried for hours to convince her to agree, but she wouldn't have any of it. I got a bit frustrated with her too, but then I prayed and I asked God to show me what to do about it. You must understand that being exposed to the dangers of a foreign country, I took prayer very seriously, and when I asked God for something I expected an answer from him. I was well aware that a wrong move or a bad decision could put our lives in grave danger. I couldn't afford stupid mistakes, because of negligence and pride, to not come before the Lord in humility and ask for help. I prayed that night, and in the morning I was sure of what to do. God told me not to do it, because I did not come there to work and make money but to tell others of His love and show what it means to trust the Lord and live by faith. My duty was to continue believing the Lord would supply all our needs, and I couldn't argue with that. I gave my answer to the man that I wouldn't go into business with him, so he decided to buy the whole place himself and used all his savings. A month had passed since I last saw him and I could hardly recognize him. He looked like he was sick and aged 10 years. I asked what happened to him and he told me that he had lost everything. His boss had gambling debts and took all his money and then declared bankruptcy. I really felt for him and his family, and I was thinking it could have been me, if I had not prayed and listened to the Lord that night. After some time had passed by, and because of our kids getting older, we decided to come back to Canada. I was able to get a good job with a large construction company in Montreal. With my salary and some money saved, we were thinking of putting a down payment in order to buy a house. We drove several places to check which house would fit our needs, and then we made an appointment at a bank to apply for a mortgage. It was then and there that Kate told me that she didn't love me anymore and wanted to leave me. After hearing these words, my heart dropped 1,000 feet into the ground. That was when a new chapter of my life began, and I became the man that I am today. How my writing began. I began to put my heart into writing at the age of 40, and not because I was an ambitious writer and wanted to be famous and make a living off of it. The way it happened is a story in itself. I couldn't sleep one night while countless thoughts were rushing through my mind. I turned around and sideways on my stomach and on my back, but no position could help me fall asleep. Finally, I got up and went into the kitchen. I looked around and noticed pen and paper on the table as if they were there waiting for me. I heard a voice in my mind telling me take it and write. It was as if God was speaking to me through the way of my thoughts, and all I had to do was write what I was thinking. Once I was done writing, I would quickly fall asleep afterwards. Each session usually didn't last more than a couple of hours. After doing this for over 20 years, naturally I developed a way with words that I didn't know was even possible. Especially since I never even finished high school or read many books, and I guess that's a bit of a failure on my part, but that hasn't stopped me from trying and succeeding, has it? Yes, I know, my English is not perfect, but as long as people understand what I am saying and enjoy what I am writing about, do you think that anyone really cares? Besides, those people who tend to look down on my lack of education probably are the same people who keep finding faults with everything else and wouldn't enjoy my writings anyway. It says that all good gifts come from above, and I believe that statement to be true. God gives us gifts, and it's up to each one of us to decide how to develop and use those gifts. It's a pity to see so many wonderful gifts going to waste, either because people don't know that they have them, or they die out because of neglect, and other times because of selfishness and greed, which turns something beautiful into something ugly. I am convinced that anything you do in life, and if your heart is in it, if it's something that you love doing and believe is going to help others, how could it not be a success? Maybe not in the way of money, but definitely in spirit. Real success in this world is full of misconceptions, and it is usually measured by what someone is able to show for himself, how many millions or billions one is worth and how many properties he owns. But in the hereafter, real success is measured on how much love and compassion you had while you were in your earthly body. The people you helped and the sacrifices you made is what determines the worth of your soul, not your money and belongings. Think about it for a while, and then pray and ask God what it is He expects you to do. Why did my wife leave me? I will not go into every detail of our marriage in this book of why she left me. I wrote enough about it in other books as I recall. Besides, I look at life a lot differently now than I did back then. Surviving the storm. For the most part, I would say I have had a pretty good life. Problems? Some, yes, but it will all go well in the end. My mind is full of fun memories about the wonderful adventures I have gone through during my life, and my heart can hardly contain the joy I feel about the magnificent moments I have lived in this amazing and most extraordinarily beautiful world. I have been fortunate enough to have even fallen in love and experienced a family of my own, with 5 beautiful children and 23 years of marriage to my credit. I have learned how to be grateful for all that I've had during my good times, when I've had plenty and everything was running so smoothly. But now I am learning a lot more, because I am learning to appreciate what I have during my worst times, and finding joy even in my sufferings. Though I don't have much left, and I have lost almost everything I had except my faith and hope in my God, who will promptly answer me and speedily come to my rescue. For the first time in my life, I am discovering what the bitter waters of suffering taste like. I have been caught right in the middle of a storm, the most terrifying storm of my life. I am not sure how I'm going to survive it yet, because I am facing some of the most dangerous beasts ever known to mankind. All the pains and hurts from the wrongdoings I have received have caused a lot of anger and hate in my heart, and through my own fears and evil imagination, I have created monstrous sharks ready to attack and devour me. By allowing negative thoughts to enter my mind and letting bitter feelings of discouragement take root in my heart, I have become my own worst enemy. Though many of those feelings would seem to be perfectly normal to some and might easily be justified in some people's minds, and they may think that it is perfectly okay to hate those who hate you or hurt those who hurt you, I just cannot accept this, because I believe that if our experiences do not teach us anything, and if we are not willing to learn from them to make ourselves better, then all the pain and suffering we go through in life will all be in vain. Through my turmoil and despair, I have learned to seek my God and ask for His help. In my agony, I have clung to His gentle words of truth. In my pain, I have cried, and He answered me and showed me how to survive the storm. In His arms I have found perfect rest, and though I am going through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for I know that my Lord is there with me. Going through terrible times has made my heart better. Losing what I had has helped me to find what I had lost. Finding God's love is the most precious gift one can ever find in this life, because it will last forever, for all eternity. If I had the power to remove my storm, to make it disappear, as if it had never happened, I would not do it, because I believe that this was the only way for me to learn how to be truly compassionate and to understand the poor and unfortunate of the world. I am confident that all of what I am going through is part of a bigger design. Perhaps we are all instruments in God's hands, and He has chosen me to be His tool at this moment, in time to get a message across to you to help to inspire and encourage you to survive your storms. It is only after we have learned the true power of love, and what it means to have mercy, that we can finally be free from bitterness and anger in our heart, and we can begin to experience joy and peace in our souls, and then see miracles happen. Saying goodbye to my ship, after seeing my relationship with my wife sinking like a broken ship, I decided that I would not stand there and watch it perish and die without doing something about it, but that I would do everything in my power to fix it, restore it, and make it all new. Because of my great love for her, I could not think of anything that could prevent me from achieving this huge and difficult task, even if it meant for me to change who I was and become who I should have always been, a more respectful, positive, and appreciative person. I have come to realize that every time someone makes a negative comment towards the other, it is like punching holes in their relationship. Ungratefulness and disrespect lead to criticism and complaints, and they are like spikes which in time will ruin even the strongest relationship. Unloving words in a relationship grow into seeds of bitterness. They work like a cancer, little by little eating everything up until there is nothing left. I realize now that what enters my mind and what I believe in my heart has a lot to do with what kind of person I will become. As much as I loved her and would have liked to enjoy seeing her happy and satisfied, I saw by now that the damage was beyond repair. I would have given my life to save her, but as I tried to repair one place, something else would break. Whatever has been restored a moment later falls apart. The wood is rotted away. Too many hard feelings and bad memories that she couldn't forget had been given a place in her heart, and had caused the ship to leak and fail to do its duty and serve its purpose. Oh, how beautiful she was the day we met, and how good she had been to me up to now. It really broke my heart to see her go this way. Though I knew of her weaknesses, and I was well aware of the problems and the hardships we had encountered on our path, all that I remember about her are the nice times and the beautiful moments we spent traveling in many parts of the world together, sailing into the deep blue, unexplored waters which are unknown to most people, and are full of adventures and excitement. It was just so fulfilling to watch her sailing away, so cheerfully and peacefully. Nothing could keep her down or make her discouraged. It was like she could feel that we were meant to be together, that we both had this unique mission in life, to bring God's love to the poor and the needy of the world. This was a turning point in her life, and she had chosen to stop and go back to where she came from, where she once used to be, and where she now feels the most secure, her own little world, with her own set of rules and ideas. She doesn't want to look up to the stars for inspiration and direction as she once used to, but prefers now to trust her own fleshly wisdom. She stopped seeing life as a great opportunity with more adventures, but everything had become more of a burden, and all she saw and remembered are the negative things. I could only hope that she would find joy and love, even if she was down and no longer up, and that she would find peace in her heart. The magical potion of love. I should have felt angry after all that had happened to me, but I feel nothing. After having been stabbed so deep in my soul by the one I loved, I should be feeling bitter inside, but my bitterness dies here and now. The love and the joy that I have in my heart belongs to me. They are put there by the King of Heaven himself, and there is absolutely nothing that she or anyone else can do to take them away from me. I have tasted the waters of cruelty and bitterness with my own lips, but I have spit it out of my mouth before it got me sick, and instead, I have drunk the magic potion of God's love and mercy. I could find many excuses to be resentful and hateful, but I choose not to. I ask my God to help me to see the good, and to help me to continue to love. I could easily blame her or someone else for all my woes, but I choose not to. I take full responsibility for my actions, and I will try to learn all that I can from my mistakes. Being in the situation that I am now is putting a strain on my humility, and it is teaching me not to dwell on the past, but to focus on the present and look ahead to the future. I want to love with all my heart and with all my strength and with all of my mind. I cannot and will not turn my back on God by judging others and being bitter about life. I choose to be kind to those who have been unkind to me, and to repay cruelty with forgiveness and love, and to be just to those who have been unjust to me. I will not forget the Lord's goodness and all that He has done for me, and I will continue to remember that I am His child, and He will always care for me. There aren't many things that I ask from God, only this, not necessarily to live an easy, comfortable and long life, but that my life here on earth be filled with joy. love and excitement, and that I can be used by Him as an instrument of peace to bring hope to the children of the world, so that even if my life will be a short one, it will be worth it. God spoke to me in the shower. While I was taking a shower today, God gave me a wonderful revelation, and made me understand that just because a marriage has ended does not mean that it failed. God reminded me that I am still the same man, with the same face, the same hands, and the same feet as before. My ex-wife too, she still is the same woman, with the same face, the same hands, and the same feet as before. Nothing has really changed except for the fact that we are no longer living together, but that is no reason for me to change the way that I feel about her, or to forget about all those wonderful years that we were together and I loved and cared for her. Just because my wife decided for whatever reason not to want to spend the rest of her life with me, that it is not an excuse for me to stop being her friend and being nice to her. If I'm able to love her and wish her happiness in spite of all the hurt and suffering that she caused me to feel, I would say that I am doing pretty well in my relationship with her considering the circumstances. For almost a year I was angry at her, thinking, how could she do this to me? I definitely did not want to be her friend ever again, not after all that I had to go through. I did not care what happened to her. I wished that she could feel the same pain that I was feeling and experience the same suffering. I asked God to deal with her as she had dealt with me. I could not see that underneath this huge problem there was such an enormous, wonderful gift waiting for me. The only thing I could see was the problem and not the gift, and that's why I complained, because the gift was invisible at that time. I discovered later that God had a perfect plan for my life. He must have known that the only way for me to fulfill this plan was for Him to completely break my heart and bring me right down to the bottom so I could learn how to be humble, and He had to use my wife to do it. If my ex had not sent me away, I would have never been serving God as I am today. By doing the worst to me, God brought out the best of me. This is why I cannot help but be nice to her, because if she hadn't done what she did, I would not be who I am today. Tears of love. It was difficult for me to accept everything that God had done in my life because I was so proud and selfish. As strange as it may seem, the more I fought what God was trying to teach me, the more I suffered. Until at last, I chose to surrender my life completely to God and let Him have His way with me. I could not accept defeat and let tragedy prevent me from finishing the race. I could not allow my pride to prevent me from fulfilling my mission, nor let my pain harden my heart and turn the love that I once felt into bitterness. I refused to believe that my life was over. It could not be, not after everything that I had gone through. I chose love over hate and mercy over revenge. I forgive you for the great harm that you have done to me, and I am willing to forget your ill actions against me. Instead, I choose to remember the tender moments that we had together, and I pray that God will deal with you kindly because of the love that you once felt for me. I cannot bear the thought of seeing any of the people that I love suffer, no matter how they feel about me or if they love me or not. The way that you feel about me does not change the way that I feel about you. How could I hate the one that I used to love? These are my tears of love and forgiveness that I shed for you. I take all of your sins against me and I give them to God, to set you free from your guilt. I pray that you will find peace and strength in the Lord, and that His joy and love will fill your heart and soul. I am all alone but never deserted, in distress perhaps, but not in despair, for my testing produces endurance, and through my endurance, my faith is made purer. Good times are fine, but it is during my worst times, when my heart pours out like water, that my soul gets cleaner. Love saved me. I'm feeling the pain of your heart, and I know the anguish that is trying to tear your soul apart. I have already visited the place you are in right now. I have tasted sorrow with my own lips, and I have experienced what it feels like to be alone. I have swum in the ocean of suffering filled by my tears, and hopelessly drowned through my own fears until love came down and saved me. I had a chance once to meet with my sworn enemy, who in no time swallowed me up into the deep. I was kept prisoner under his evil dominion and tormented endlessly by his false accusations. Every day I was fed poison for my meal, and slept at night with my disgraceful roommates, hate, anger, and revenge, whose main job was to make sure that I was fed with continuous lies, until I would convince myself that my life was not worth a cent, and that I might as well end it. I was not permitted to have any lights day or night. It was as if darkness itself had tried to adopt me, and all I could see was this tiny spark of light so far away that it seemed humanly impossible to reach. Slowly I began to realize and appreciate how nice it was to have some kind of light in there, even if it was just a little spark. It was better than nothing. It gave me hope that maybe there was something marvelous waiting for me outside of this horrible place. The spark of light must have been some kind of intelligent life form, because I sensed that it was trying to communicate with me by way of my thoughts. It made me feel a lot better by telling me that everything was going to be all right in the end. I was feeling so weak from this spiritual poison, and had allowed my enemy to seduce me with it. It then became clear to me that if I wanted to escape from the fire pit that I was in, I had to do it soon, while I still had a bit of strength left. I felt so tired of everything around me that I just wanted to close my eyes and never wake up again. I would have paid any price and suffered 1,000 deaths just to keep the woman I loved and the family of my dreams. When that was lost, a big part of me was lost too. I felt betrayed by the only one who I believed loved me, the one I thought would stay with me till the end. When all of that was gone from me, my desire to live on had gone as well. I became a fugitive with no place to turn. I refused any help or advice from people who I did not think knew the answer, but deep down inside I knew what the answer to my problem was, and what exactly it was that I had to do to save myself from my calamity. I was fighting a battle for any human being alone and feeling as though it was impossible to win. If there was anyone at all who could have helped rescue me from the unbreakable fortress that I myself had helped my adversary to create, it would have to be the great creator of the universe himself. The maker of all things, the only one capable of binding up my strong enemies and delivering me from their oppression. The great spirit of love himself must certainly have come down from the heavens to save me and set me free. He sent his special angels to tell me that I was still his dearest child and that he loved me very much. They helped me understand the purpose of my ordeal, that I had to go through this in order to fulfill the great plans that he had for me. It was then that I decided not to throw my life away, but to live it purely for good instead. Then suddenly that little spark of light that once seemed to be so far away began to move closer and closer, becoming larger and larger as it advanced towards me, until the whole room was filled with its splendid light. The darkness fled because it could not bear to be in the same place as the light. The lies, the anger, the hate and the revenge fled as well, because the lies could not handle the truth, nor anger the peace, nor hate the love, nor revenge the forgiveness, all because of all the good spiritual food that I began to feed myself with. Since love had saved me, I began to see beauty in my ashes, joy through my pain, sweet music from my suffering, defeat as a great victory for God, problems not as a stumbling block, but as a ladder that reaches heaven. You will never know the true joy of living until you have discovered the power of believing love always loves all of my life. I have been waiting for a moment like this, when my feet would take me to the light, towards endless love, perfect peace and everlasting joy. I have come to understand that life is a miracle from beginning to end, and that everything that is happening to me on earth is planned from above, designed in advance, by the skillful hands of my great master, who wants me to know how important and special I am to his project. If you want to move forward in life, praise your way through it. A grateful heart works like dynamite in a mine. It blows up mountains out of the way, in order for love to triumph. If you were to take away the love out of my life, there wouldn't be any joy left anywhere inside of me, because everything wonderful that has ever happened in my life was because of love. More love means more peace, and more peace means more joy. So if everyone would have more love, people would have more peace, and if everybody would have more peace, then the world would have more joy, and there wouldn't be any wars or crime of any kind, because only unloving, unhappy and troubled people commit terrible things against each other. If you cannot love, forgive and forget, it is simply because your love isn't big enough, therefore, it cannot do what it should do. Love always loves, it will always forgive and it will always forget, for it has no choice but to love, because that is what love really is, more love. God is love, and if we live in love, God will live in us and us in Him, and so we can love, forgive and forget, just as He does. People who normally get angry about their sufferings, however, have a difficult time healing from their pain, and because of the bitterness that is kept inside their heart, and of their unwillingness to let it go and forgive, it will actually rob them of the joy that comes afterwards. I have no power over what people will do to me, but I do have complete control over what I will do to them, so you can love me, or you can love me not. Either way, it makes me glad to know that my love has brought you joy. There is no shame in embracing love at any time, in any place, with anyone, for there is no greater treasure in this world than to be loved by someone. Enjoy life while you can, whenever you can, and for as long as you can, for the days are drawing near and before you know it, you'll be old and say to yourself, I didn't have any pleasure in life. If love was to come to me in the form of an earthquake, I would stand right in the middle of it and cry out, shake it hard and well, fall on me, crush me with it, and bury me alive with your love. I would rather be killed by love and die happy, than be killed by boredom and die in misery. People who do love are the only people in the world who are truly awake and alive, and everyone else is either asleep or dead. The Spirit of God has awakened my soul, raising my body from the grave, put fire into my bones, flowing with passion into my flesh, in order to do what men thought impossible. I am experiencing the greatest love that there is to be found, and at the same time feeling the deepest pain that there is all around, but I am still here, ready and willing to love at least for another day in spite of my hurt. The joy in my heart is bigger than my sorrow, and the light in my soul greater than my darkness, but the price for my redemption is nothing more than a broken heart. I need joyful moments in my life in order to inspire me to write, but most important of all, I need angels' powers to help me unlock God's treasure trunk. Joseph, After my wife left me in 2003, I found myself quickly slipping into the pit of hell. I felt so much pain that I thought my heart would burst open. I cried for 3 months, days and nights. I could hardly eat or sleep, and I lost my job too. I was a broken-hearted man wandering the streets like a dog without love who nobody wanted. I was sad, but more than sad, I was angry. Angry that the woman I thought would stay with me forever had shut the door in my face, but I could not and I would not allow my life to end in misery. I refused to accept defeat, because I couldn't believe that I was born to be a loser. All I remember doing was crying, until one night the sky opened up for me, and I saw my future. I made a promise. I pledged God that if He took the pain away from me, and would give me peace, I would do anything. Even if it meant for me to clean the streets and wipe them sparkling clean with my tongue, I would have done it, as long as my heart would stop hurting and I could get some sleep. My pride was completely crushed, and I began to see and understand what it was that I had to do, in order to right the wrongs in my life. I thought that somehow I could turn my disadvantage into an advantage and become a champion of love, to give hope to those who, like me, have lost everything and are overwhelmed with terrible pain. I packed my clothes and I took off to a far distant land, and began to look for answers, turning over one stone after another, but I found nothing that I was expecting. You see, I wasn't just looking to have merely a good life or a better life, but what I really wanted was to live the best, most beautiful, perfect life anyone could ever live in this planet. And if it meant for me spending the rest of my days looking for it, so be it. I did not know where I belonged anymore, but I had this notion that if I traveled to some old places I had been before and visit old friends and members of my family, perhaps that could help me find what I was searching for. My trip to Italy, so I went to Italy for a while, to the place where I was born and had lived for the first 20 years of my life. We are 5 brothers and 1 sister. I am in the middle. My first brother lives near Rome, and the second near Venice, while the rest of the family are still in Sicily. There is still a strong bond of love and unity within my family, but the fact that I left home at the age of 18 and lived in a different part of the world for so long, puts such a distance between me and my brothers that, at times when we are all together, I feel adrift like a ship with broken sail. I was trying to be happy and positive, and act as if nothing had happened, but the pain and the sadness I carried with me was bigger than I, and though I tried to, I could not hide what I was feeling. I know this much, that it wouldn't have hurt me that much, if it wasn't for the fact that I loved that woman very much, but she is gone now, and I must find a way to survive my storm, and be able to emerge victoriously over my pain. It is my prayer not to blame someone else for my troubles, but to take full responsibility for my actions, and in time perhaps, with God's help, learn to forgive her and be able to transform my anger into a pure source of energy, to enlighten the world. I did not have a plan on how exactly to change my life. At first I wanted to die and throw my life away, but then I wanted to live and give my life for something higher than myself. I believe that my desire to do good grew inside of me like a big tall tree, and my cry for help became louder and clearer for all the angels in heaven to see and hear, and it is very possible that my problems became everyone else's problems too. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if the mighty King of the universe called for an emergency meeting, and summoned the bravest warriors of light and the wisest of the wise, in order to help me out. I am only a man, but God promised to give me the strength of 1,000 men, and empowered me with a force that would make even angels wonder. When I thought I had nothing to live for, God showed me a bright and wonderful life waiting for me. I heard that my best friend was having problems with depression, and had not seen nor spoken with anyone for about 2 years, besides a few people who were caring for his needs. He was living now with his parents, and all he did was eat and sleep all day long. I phoned his parents home to let him know that I was in town, and his mom told me that he would see me. We were very good friends, and grew up in the same neighborhood, until at the age of 18 our choices separated us. I took a spiritual path, he took the money path. He became successful and rich, while I became happy and wise. He got married and went through a divorce, and if that wasn't enough, one day the police came to his premises sequestering all his merchandise, claiming it to be stolen goods. After years of courts and lawyers, finally he was acquitted and his stuff was returned to him, but the media and the gossip of a small town nearly ruined his life, destroying his health, forcing him to slip deep into depression. Before he could get better, to make things worse, a masked man came to his store at gunpoint to rob and empty his safe. That was the end of it. After that he closed himself in his room, and never went out for the space of 2 years. I arrived at his house late afternoon. We sat down together around a small table in the corner of his room and we talked a bit. Even though we had chosen different paths in life, there were some similarities between us, for we both had suffered tremendously, but there was one difference that kept us apart. I saw my problems not as stumbling blocks, but as an opportunity to climb even higher, whereas he did not. I was with him no longer than 15 minutes, when suddenly he began to laugh out loud. Both of his parents heard the laughing all the way from the kitchen and, in shock, came to see what was happening, for it had been a long time since they heard their son laughing. I have been given the gift of making people happy, and I do have the ability to reach deep down into people's hearts, in order to bring out the best in them. I asked him to come and travel with me so that I could show him a beautiful way to live, but he would not. Being prisoner to his fears, oppressed by the demons of discouragement and despair, there was nothing more that I could do for him but to pray, so I left to follow my quest, run the race, and keep my faith. The last thing I heard about him was that he died a year later in his bed. What a pity, how sad, what a waste of a good life. The youngest of my brothers is a professional pastry maker, and a very good cook, and so before leaving he prepared a great feast for me, with all my favorite goodies that I love to eat. I traveled north after that, for I had a list of old friends that I wanted to see before long. I stayed in a beautiful farm near Rome for a few months, and it felt great to be around decent wise people who understood how I felt. I would wake up at 6 a.m. and go for a run, enjoying the fresh air and the panoramic view of the hills of the beautiful countryside. No matter what I was doing, I waited for the answer to come. I prayed and meditated daily, and the fact that the answer never came was an answer in itself, because it helped me understand that Italy wasn't the place I was meant to be. Back to Canada. I went back to Canada, still heartbroken and confused, carrying a lifetime of guilt wherever I went. I knew I had not been a good husband or the best father either. I failed miserably from day one, for my idea of being a good person just didn't go far enough. I hurt people because of my ignorance, and I alienated everyone I ever cared about, because of my failure in doing the things that matter most. I did terrible things, selfish things, going out with friends, fishing all day, and then came home late at night complaining about the food I was eating or the house not being clean enough, and instead of thanking and praising my wife for doing such a great job teaching school to our 5 children, and making dinner, I was being critical of her, and would put her down. I even expected her to make love to me after all of that, and if she said let's talk, I would reply after sex, not now, but then I would go right to sleep or perhaps go and watch a movie instead. She would talk to me, but I hardly listened, and that's when she used to yell at me. Even with my children, I repeated the same bad behavior. When they came to me with a question, I was usually too busy to listen to them, and I would often send them to their mother instead, because I knew she would always find time for them. That's how wonderful she was, a real angel. This doesn't mean that I never did anything for my children or my wife, not at all. According to the world's standard, I think I did all right, but with all that I know now, I wish that I would have done a lot more for them. Lost but not forsaken time had gone by, and I needed a job to survive, but I had no skills of any kind, which made it very difficult for me to be hired by anyone. Fortunately, I found a landscaping company who took me in. The boss was also of Sicilian origin, and had pity on me knowing that I had lost my family and everything. At that period, I was communicating with a girl named Sylvie through email. We had met at a park and I had given her one of my books, and then she thought of getting in touch with me because of the beautiful way I write. I arranged a meeting with her, and she invited me to visit her at her home. She was surprisingly beautiful and intelligent, and I was glad to have tea with her, and be able to share my life experiences with her. She happened to mention that she was looking for someone to share her house with, at which point I suggested that maybe I could come and live with her, but we decided to take a day to think about it. The next day I went to see Sylvie with my answer. I wasn't sure how to say it without bursting into tears. I told her that I would like to move in, but there was a great possibility that if I did that, I could fall in love with her, and it's only fair that she should know that before inviting me in. She too, with tears in her eyes, expressed the desire to live with me, because she had prayed that one day she would find a spiritual man to learn about life and God. She thought that I was a gift to her, but only as a friend, not as a husband. I didn't exactly know how to do this, to live with someone under the same roof and just be friends when you are in love with that person. I stayed about 2 months, and I don't regret any of it. Regardless of my heart getting crushed with almost unbearable pain, what I was able to learn from that experience is as great as the suffering itself. Since we agreed not to get involved physically, the time that we were able to spend together was all about talking and communicating every thought. We shared our intimate thoughts and desires, until we became closer than most couples are. Every day I would write loving messages for her and put it under her pillow for when she came home from work. I would do all kinds of things that I knew she would be happy about. Then one night, I told her that I wanted to leave, because I felt that I was getting too emotionally attached to her, and it hurt me so much. The next day she didn't even go to work but stayed in bed all day crying. I came home from work, and I saw her like I had never seen her before. I asked, what happened? She did not want me to leave her, because she said I was her only hope to learn about God. She did go to some churches, but she liked the way I presented things to her, and now that I might be going, she would be missing all of that. She mentioned to me that she had this great desire to go on a mission to Haiti. She had visited the place before and felt that for some reason God wanted me to take her there. I said that I would think about it. I decided to stay, and my crisis was over for a while. One day in the middle of the night, a very large man burst into my room while I was sleeping and told me to get the hell out of there. Apparently he was her ex-boyfriend, who she had invited for a sleepover. He was so jealous of me. I got up from my bed, not sure if this was real or just a bad dream. It was real, all right. I went upstairs, trying to understand why she was allowing this to happen. She did not say a word to me, so I figured that she was in agreement with this guy. My only words to her were, "If this is what you want, you two deserve to have each other." I packed up my things and left right away that morning. I called my boss and told him what had happened and that I could not go to work that day, because I needed to find a place to live right away. After I put everything I owned into my van, I realized that I had no idea where to go. I was practically homeless and heartbroken again. I went to see my ex-wife and asked if she would be so kind as to let me stay at her place for a couple of weeks until I could find my own place. She refused at first. I begged her and I cried, and then she agreed to let me stay. The next morning Sylvie phoned me, telling me that she made a mistake and asked me for forgiveness. She told me she sent the man away and that she knew that this guy would just make her life miserable. I told her that I had already forgiven her the moment I shut the door of her apartment behind me. I never went back to live at her place though, but we kept in contact for a while, until that too stopped and it was time for me to move on. It is very important to underline the fact that my idea to go to Miami came only about because Sylvie rejected my love, for if she had accepted me and loved me as I wanted her to, I would have never had the courage to leave town and do the things that I was about to do. I would probably still be her roommate and live an ordinary life. The problems that I faced forced me to become extraordinary, seeking out help and guidance to do something meaningful with my life. These were my exact words to Sylvie before I left for Florida. "I'm leaving for a few months, and you will see that by the time I come back, I will have both our tickets for Haiti paid for with full support, and we won't have to worry about anything. I will prove to you that God is powerful, if you believe and trust in His promises. I am convinced that we are born on this earth to learn about the next life. But also, we are here to be a force for good in the world. I cannot accept the fact that human beings, as intelligent as we are, were meant only to work and make money and just simply think about ourselves and our pleasures. I want to be like my fathers and forefathers before me who believed that God was more than enough to fulfill all their desires. I want to obtain riches up in heaven, because that is where my real treasure is going to be, and that is the place where I will be spending all eternity. Just as some people like to hate, I like to love. While some find pleasure in seeing others suffer by making their lives difficult, I enjoy making others happy by trying to make their lives as close to heaven as possible. If I were a doctor at this time, I would heal people for free. If I were a lawyer, I would defend people at no charge. One thing I have learned recently about life is that we will never regret what we have done for others. The only thing we can really be sorry about is if we have only lived selfishly for ourselves. Someone not too long ago asked me, "Joseph, you have to live, and you have to eat, but how much can a person eat anyway? By nature, humans are just selfish." Don't give me all that talk about how we need to think about ourselves and our family first. There is never the risk that a person may be just too good. Our basic instincts are self-preservation, so that if someone is hungry, he will eat, if he is thirsty, he will drink, and if he is cold, he will warm himself up. It is true that it costs me to do what I am doing, and it is true that when I talk to people for 8 to 10 hours straight every day in the hot sun, I feel drained at the end of the day from all of the giving that I had been doing. Sometimes I felt lonely, and sometimes I cried at night. I still missed all that I used to have, but that is all gone now. In the past, I used to buy so many things, but at one point, I was disappointed about it all. I realized that all those material things I had bought for myself suddenly seemed to have lost their value and left me empty inside. I had a hard time understanding and having compassion on people with problems. I thought that it was their fault somehow that their lives were in such a mess, and that they must have done something to deserve it. But after I went through my big storm, now if people are having problems and crying, I can more easily cry with them. I understand better now what it is to have pain and suffering and sleepless nights. As a result of my troubles, my heart has become much better, and I am able to see my tribulations as an opportunity to make me a greater human being. I saw God's purpose in crushing me the way He did, and I pictured His mighty hand using all of my pain and sufferings as a big wave to lift me up instead of dragging me down, so that I could be a light and hope to others. If someone is in despair and suffering, they don't have to give up. If they are in pain, they don't need to get drunk. If they are being hurt, they don't have to be angry and to hate. If I can love and forgive, so can you. I am living proof that we can survive the storms. At the present, my real true joy is all of the people that I am able to help and to make happy. If I cry at night, it is only because of how fortunate I feel to be living such a wonderful life. I feel privileged to have been part of such an incredible and perfect heavenly design. My trip to Miami, I had no question in my mind that Miami was the place where God wanted me to be. He knew Miami was a place where people from around the world would come and find Him. That particular city I had believed to be like a station where many of those who seek miracles stop by. It is a place where many souls come searching for answers and ask themselves 2 questions. Does love really exist? And, is it possible to find peace? The answer to those questions is yes. I don't know why God has chosen me to tell you this, nor do I understand why I had to go all the way to Miami to be able to answer those questions. The truth is, if love did not exist, we wouldn't be searching for it. If there was no such thing as peace, our soul would not hunger for it. I believe that the fact that we are asking these questions proves that there must be answers somewhere. Just because someone has never experienced love, does not mean that love doesn't exist. If someone has not found peace, that does not mean that peace is not achievable. Perhaps one reason some haven't found it yet is because they are looking in all the wrong places. This is good too, in a way, because now they know where peace isn't, therefore they can get closer to where it is. I am not going to tell you how to live your life or what to believe, that is your choice. I am going to tell you one thing though, put God first in your life. Just try and prove me wrong when I say this to you. If you do this, you will be hit with a wave of happiness that will overflow right over the top. Often I ask myself the question, why me and not someone else? It is like winning $1 billion. Knowing God in a very intimate and personal way is priceless. Being aware that He's real and loves you is the greatest miracle of all. Even if I may have been confused before, things are clear to me now. If I was not sure back then, I'm certain today, I was sent by God on a mission to Miami, and this mission is getting clearer by the hour. Not only did God want me to be an angel of hope to the lost souls of such a lovely place, but He brought me exactly where He wanted me to be so that I could meet certain, specific people and experience a chain of events that would inspire my heart, and launch a vision in my soul which would change the world forever. I had no idea where to go once I arrived in the city. I had never been in Miami before in my life, and I did not know anyone. I even got lost and ended up on the wrong side of town. But was it a mistake that I got lost, or was it all part of a divine higher plan? I drove my '91 Honda Accord station wagon all the way down from Canada. I prayed for God to be my protector, my provider and my guide. I had brought 500 of my booklets, thoughts on relationships, anything is possible if you believe, and timeless whispers to give away as gifts to people that I met along the way. I considered myself fortunate to have found such peace, love and happiness in my life. I felt compelled to give something in return as a contribution to the world. I told my plans to some people at work where I do construction for a landscaping company. Many thought that I was only wasting my time and money by giving things away for free. Instead, they said I should have put every penny in the bank and kept working all winter long, and when I had saved enough money, I should have put a down payment on a house for myself. But if I had done only that, I would have no story to tell now, would I? If I hadn't had the courage to lose sight of the shore, how could I have known that there were new oceans to be discovered? I want to make it clear that I did not go to Florida to have a vacation and have fun. Well, fun? Yes, but not to relax. I had something very specific that I had to do there. I believe in having a good time, and I love to laugh. But I consider sharing, giving and helping people to be a lot of fun as well. I admire love and beauty, and I enjoy all of God's creation much more than the finest jewelry or the latest fashion. It thrills me to have deep, meaningful, spiritual conversations with people, a lot more than drinking the most exquisite champagne. I get drunk by sharing my thoughts and getting to know what someone else is thinking more than I do with wine, and it does not cost me a thing, nor give me a hangover. I could have thought of 1,000 things to do in Canada and found a million reasons to stay. They all would have been legitimate excuses why I should have stayed and taken care of myself. But even if I had been offered a job as the president of a country, I could not pass up this great opportunity given to me by the great King of Heaven himself. I chose to become an angel of hope to hundreds of people who I was about to meet in Miami, and the wonderful travelers who came there searching for answers and for miracles in their lives. I didn't need to know in advance where I would stay, who I would meet, what I would do or who I would become. All that I needed to be sure of was that God was by my side, and that this was His idea and not just mine. I thought that if I could see a sign, find a reason to believe that God was behind me on this 100%, then nothing could ever stop me from going. My pretext: it was early afternoon when I got to the U.S. border. The officer told me to park my car and enter an office where I was asked some routine questions. He asked me where I was going and for how long. I said that I was going to Florida for 5 months. He wanted to know why I was going for such a long period of time. I said that I am a Christian writer, and I was going on a vacation to write a new book. I was also bringing a box of my books with me to give away as gifts to people there. He made a joke saying, "Well, if you are a Christian, then you are not going to lie to me, are you? What is your job in Canada?" he asked me. "I do construction work," I said. After pausing a few moments, he looked at me shaking his head, saying, "There is no way that I can let you come into the country with what you have just told me. It sounds as if you are going to Florida to work." I gently replied with, "Believe me, sir, I wrote some very good books that I know will give hope to a lot of people. If you do not let me go into the U.S., then perhaps it must not be God's will for me to make this trip after all, and I should go back home." But if it is truly God's will that I should go, then with all due respect, sir, you will be remembered in history as the man who stopped a great deed from happening. I had resigned myself to the thought that maybe the whole idea to make this trip was just a big mistake and had nothing to do with God at all. More likely, I thought I was driven by my own pride to do it. The officer looked at me once more in the eyes and told me to wait for him outside. There, he told me, I am sorry that I cannot let you come into the country. However, you don't have to go back to Canada. Try to come in at a different border, he said, and this time do not say what you just told me. But say, and he told me exactly what I needed to say the next time that I would be crossing. Wow, it was as if God himself was saying to me through this man, don't give up, I am going before you and preparing a way for you. I kept on driving west for 8 more hours until about midnight. I decided to park my car in a small food area and go to sleep. I thought that it would be better to go across the border early in the morning, when I would be all fresh and rested. I had brought with me a nice warm sleeping bag. With my station wagon, I had put the back seats down so I could sleep somewhat comfortably. At 6 a.m. I was already on the other side of the border and on my way to Florida. Hallelujah! From then on, even though I was alone making this long journey, I could not help but feel like God was sitting right next to me. I was happily singing, praying, and crying for joy almost the whole trip down. I was envisioning all of the wonderful things that I imagined were waiting for me there. But how could I know what those things were, and how could I find them if I didn't even know where I was going exactly? At this time, I did not know that Miami was the place that I would base myself from. All I knew was that I would like to be somewhere as near the sea as possible. Once I approached the coast, I was so excited that I wanted to stop just about anywhere. I don't know exactly why, but I just kept on driving. Actually, Miami was the last place that I would have thought in Florida that I wanted to be. I thought that a much smaller city would have been better for me. Finally, I was so tired of driving that I decided to get off of State Highway 95 and check out places around West Palm Beach. I wasn't too impressed by what I saw, and again I got back on the 95 and kept on driving, but where? Something inside my head was telling me, go to Miami, and once there you will be told what to do. As I approached the city of Miami, I got both excited and confused. I got lost, and I didn't know if I should go straight, turn right or turn left. To me, any place was as good as any other, so I decided to go left toward the downtown area. I approached what looked to be a poor, deserted street. I noticed a couple of guys standing outside a bar with tattoos on their arms talking to each other. I spotted a couple of girls walking down the street. I said to myself, where am I? God, where did you bring me? I knew that I was tired from the 3 days driving, to the point that I could not even think straight. I felt that what I needed was a good shower and a good night's sleep, and I would be fine the next day. I tried a few hotels that I thought would be within my price range, but they were all full. I kept on driving around different blocks and ended up just wasting more gas and getting more tired. Finally, I reached my limit. I stopped the car, and with tears in my eyes, I cried to God saying, if you don't get me out of this situation and help me to find a place to spend the night, I'm going to park my car and go to sleep, and the next day, I'm going to drive back to Canada. After that, I started up my car and drove around the block one more time. I noticed a light flashing in one of the buildings. I got the feeling I should stop the car, go inside and ask someone there for information. I found out that it was a soup kitchen for the homeless ran by a Christian organization. When I came into this small room, there was some music playing, and there were about 30 people waiting to hear the minister speak before having their supper. I felt a bit ridiculous, that I was asking directions for a hotel room in a place full of homeless people. The guy I talked to was a bit busy and couldn't answer me right away, so he invited me to sit down, and later when he would be free, we could talk. I knew right then that God wanted me to listen to him a bit longer than I had when I was praying in my car, so I decided to stay, and I closed my eyes praying. I felt refreshed and renewed in an instant. Listening to that lovely music had inspired me and given me strength. I was sure now that God had brought me to this place for a reason, and I felt compelled to speak to everyone there. It was as if a voice was speaking into my mind saying, I brought you here for a purpose, to speak to them and let them know that they are my true champions. I knew that this was God speaking to me, and I was trying to talk myself out of it saying, even if I were to speak to them, will it even make a difference in their lives? The voice inside of me still replied, they will see that you are speaking from your heart, because the pain and suffering you have experienced in your life is similar to theirs. You will give them hope, and will inspire them to have faith in me, and what's wrong with that? At this point, I got up and asked the minister permission to speak. I introduced myself as a writer. I said that I had been touched by God at a young age and that as a result of that experience, I was now dedicating my time and energy in presenting to people everywhere a God who has a sense of humor and who is a joy to believe in. I said, trying to have faith shouldn't feel like taking a daily dosage of medicine in order to keep ourselves alive and cure us of some kind of bad disease so we don't die. It should feel like something fun to do, like drinking fresh juice. Faith makes us stronger and helps us to see ourselves as champions. We don't have to be first or strongest or smartest. We just need to make it to the finish line. Faith makes you feel special and important and worth something to yourself. We are survivors, and the fact that we can deal with life situations with love and kindness makes all of us real heroes and real champions. Human beings are God's most precious creations on the face of the earth. Don't you ever forget it? We are God's real, true champions. After I had finished, a guy named Chris came to me saying, "You have a way of speaking that gets right into the heart." I gave Chris one of my booklets, "Anything is possible if you believe." Then everyone else in the room wanted one too, so I went back to my car and brought a bunch of my books in to give to everyone around me. Once they had all left the building, I remembered that I didn't have a place to spend the night yet. So I asked the minister if he knew of a small hotel where I could get a room for the night, and he showed me a place nearby. It wasn't the greatest of places, but I took it anyway. At least I could get some rest and be ready for the following day. That night I had only one thing on my mind: a warm shower and a nice bed. Even if I had known that the world was going to end the next day, I wouldn't have cared less. I was so tired from 3 days of driving that I went right to sleep. The next morning, I was fully rested, feeling like a new man, and anxious to discover the many, wonderful things that I believed God had waiting for me there. I had a limited budget to rent an apartment and did not know anyone in the city who could show me around. South Beach, I was so excited to find out that there was a beautiful beach nearby. I decided I would walk a couple of miles to get a peek. While on the way, I saw a man trying to fix his car. I made a joke, asking him if he found it easier to fix his car or his relationship with his wife. He laughed. I told him that I had written a booklet on fixing relationships, and we talked for a good half an hour together. Alberto was so interested in what I was saying that for a moment, I thought that he had completely forgotten that he had a car to fix. He told me that his car could wait, but he could not wait to look at my booklets. I asked him if he knew of an apartment that I could rent for a few months, and he left his car right there the way it was, and offered to walk me 2 blocks down to a place where he was staying. He introduced me to the manager of the building, who was willing to rent me a very nice place 50 feet from the beach for only $800 a month. I went to see the apartment, and I liked it, so I gave him a small deposit and asked if he could keep it for me for a couple of days, and he said it was fine with him. Now that the apartment issue had been resolved, I felt so much better, and I could right away start concentrating on sharing and helping people. I also realized that with all of my excitement that morning to get to the beach, I had forgotten to look at the name of the hotel where I was staying. I was too tired to walk all the way back, so I decided to take a bus, which I thought would take me across the same bridge I had crossed earlier that day. But the bus must have taken a different bridge. After I got off the bus, I realized that I was in the wrong place. I was completely lost. Everything I had, my car, my clothes, my money, were all at the hotel. I had no clue how to get to it. The only thing I remembered was this bridge to South Miami Beach. There must have been at least a few similar bridges in the city, but I was confident that if I could find the right bridge, I could also find my way back to the hotel. It took me a good 2 hours walking and praying before I finally found my hotel. However, if I had not made what seemed to be such a stupid mistake, I would have never met this special girl from Europe, Ashley, who was waiting at a bus stop and who in a couple of days would be leaving on a big cruise ship back to Europe. She was happy to meet me and to receive 2 of my booklets. That we decided to have breakfast together the next morning, where we could continue to talk some more about the love of God and what I was doing in Miami. My first day at the beach, I met Rick on the beach that morning. As I was coming toward him, our eyes met, and we were both smiling even before either one of us had said a word. Rick was a born comedian with a great sense of humor. He had come to Miami from a nearby town. He had been a minister of a small church, and was now there in Miami mainly to pray and to find out if it was God's will for him to relocate elsewhere. Rick was temporarily staying with friends in Hollywood, Florida, and the next day he introduced me to some of them there. Some very kind ladies ended up feeling very sympathetic toward my work, and offered to help find a cheaper place for me to rent. One of them knew of a Peruvian family who had a room to rent for $400 per month. I canceled my first place and moved into a more affordable room. I had to take a 1-hour bus ride to reach Miami, but it ended up working out very well for me. The 20-minute walk to catch my bus in the morning and at night were my best times and became so precious to me. I would pray while I walked, and I could hear God speak to me so clearly. Rick was quickly impressed with me and my mission in helping people, and he began to follow me around wherever I went. He liked my methods, and wanted to watch how I expressed God's love and beauty to others. It was all right with me if he wanted to come along, and I enjoyed having his company as well. He always made me laugh with his comments. Often he would meet someone on the beach and would give them one of my writings. He would call me from afar along the shore and ask me to come and talk to these people. He had been telling them great stories about me. Joseph is a writer. If you read one of his writings, you will fall in love with his books. The words he writes will make you cry, also saying that he looks like a famous actor. Some of the girls must have been quite disappointed when they finally got to meet me in person, and found out that I am only a simple old guy. It was a lot of fun to have Rick around, even though he almost got me killed once. We decided to make a day trip to the Florida Keys. He was driving, and while I was sleeping he didn't realize that he was on a two-lane bridge. He was passing a car and did not expect anyone to be coming toward him from the other direction. So there were 3 cars trying to squeeze onto a two-lane road. The noise of the horns woke me up, and I saw the other car missing us by just a few inches. Rick had to stop the car and was having a hard time breathing. I cannot explain why I felt so unbelievably calm and safe at that moment. I can only tell you that I have never felt more secure as I was feeling at that time in my life, knowing that I was in God's perfect will. I met a girl later in Miami who told me, "Joseph, be careful. This place is very dangerous. The world is not as you see it. There are some very mean people out there ready to take advantage and hurt you." But I can honestly say that I would feel more secure knowing that I was doing what God wanted me to do, even if I were to find myself in the middle of a war zone, rather than if I were to be sleeping in my own bed, knowing that I was not doing what God wanted me to do. When people meet me, I have often been asked why I seem to be so calm. What is my secret? They want to know. They think that I must meditate a lot. I do, but not in the way most people might think. There hasn't been a recent moment in my life that I haven't been thinking about God or praying for someone else. I ask God every day to give me more of His love and His wisdom, and to be able to shine with His joy and light so that people can see Him and not just me. Back to my story with Rick, we did reach the Keys that day. We did not get lost nor killed, thank God, maybe so I could finish this story for you. It was noon when we arrived, and we went right to the beach, where Rick went for a swim, and I started making conversation with people. Later that night, we decided to walk toward the bay and find a restaurant where we could eat. We noticed different artists and clowns doing street plays, with quite a big crowd of people watching them. I was having an interesting conversation with a woman from Germany. I was talking to her about faith and the importance of believing in our heart before we can see actual miracles happen. Most of the 15 minutes that I was talking with her, she did not say much, but just looked at me with her big, lovely eyes. It was as if I could feel all of the love coming out of her body. She had the most gorgeous light shining from her sweet and gentle face. I began to notice that tears were slowly coming down her cheeks. Right then, a tall, strong guy approached us to see what was going on. Oh no, it was her husband, and I had just made his wife cry. Good thing that he was a spiritual man, and it didn't take him long to figure out that his wife's tears were tears of joy. So before leaving, I offered her one of my booklets, but she refused. I could not understand why, so I asked her why. When she told me that it was because of her emotions running too high, I insisted that she please take one. She did, and she gave me one of the most heartfelt hugs that I have ever received in my life. One Sunday morning, Rick decided to bring me to a certain church that he knew about. We arrived late, near the end of the service. I was introduced to the minister, and for some reason I felt strongly that God wanted me to say something to everyone there, so I asked if I could say a few words, and right that morning I had just finished writing a text called Immortal Love, and I just read it to them. Everyone was just astonished, because everything they had been talking about that morning had a lot to do with what I had just been reading to them. They were all praising God for me being there, because there was no way that I could know what they had been talking about that day. Afterward, I spent a little time with the minister and his wife. They do a lot of wonderful work all around the world to help needy people. I got right to the point. I asked Steve, if I were to work for you, could you send me on a mission? He thought for a couple of minutes, and then, of all the places there are in the world, he told me, would you like to go to Haiti? I have a house for you. I will buy your ticket, plus you will receive a small salary. I replied, if I go, I would like to go with a friend, and he said fine. It was so amazing how perfectly God could answer my prayer for me and Sylvie to go on a mission. I phoned her that night and gave her the news, but after all that, she wasn't willing to go. It seemed to be a big price for her to let go of everything and follow God. I knew that God did this miracle for her sake, to show her what He is capable of doing, but He also did it to test her faith, to see if she loved God enough to give up everything for Him. Who knows, maybe she will get another chance some other time. However, I do know that given that she made that choice, she hardly seems to be the girl I used to know. We don't talk much anymore, and when I've tried to say something to her, it is like we speak 2 different languages. About 2 weeks later, Rick and I parted company. He went back to his work, and I continued my mission of spreading God's love to as many as I could, like I had before, only now, alone. But that's okay. To me there is no such thing as strangers, only friends we haven't met yet. Angel of Hope being in Miami for me was as if I had landed in a place like paradise. What happened to me there was like magic, where wishes do come true. Giving the answers to people at the right moment, not a minute too soon or too late, was the greatest miracle of all. It was obvious that God wanted me to be there, and pretty soon people began calling me an angel of hope. At first I didn't pay much attention to it, but after hearing it about 2 to 3 times a week, eventually it got my attention. I got several emails saying that meeting me had inspired them, as if they had met an angel. So I thought, am I an angel of hope just like they say? One day while I was watching the sunset on the South Beach, I felt the compulsion to go and say hello to someone who seemed to be staring at the sea for quite some time. I walked right up to her and introduced myself, saying, "I am Joseph." She looked at me and softly said, "Could you please give me a hug?" I said sure, and as I leaned over her she whispered in my ears, "I was waiting for you." "I don't know what you mean," I said. "Could you be more specific? I don't understand what you're talking about." "Before you came, I was praying that someone would come and talk to me. So I talked with her and she began to cry. I took one of my books, Timeless Whispers, and gave it to her and then I left. Days later I received an email from her saying, "Joseph, I didn't tell you everything that time we met, but now I can tell you exactly what had happened. Before you appeared I was thinking of ending my life by throwing myself into the sea. That's why I was praying asking God to send me an angel to save me. When I looked at you and I heard you talk, I knew you were my angel who came to help me. So I want to say thank you for saving my life." I saw her again a year later, and she insisted that I would come and stay at her flat with some of her friends, instead of renting a room at the hotel. I had the greatest time at her place. It was like being in a comedy show every night. One day, two couples invited me to sit with them at the beach, and they asked me to read something from my book, Thoughts on Relationships. One of them told me that I resemble the actor Ben Kingsley when he played in the movie Gandhi. People say that often about me. Maybe that's one reason they find it interesting to listen to me. I don't know, and I don't care. I am just glad that they listen. I hadn't even finished reading half of the page when I noticed that one of the girls had tears in her eyes. The others were touched as well, from what I could see. One of them could not keep his mind off Gandhi, and he told me that he noticed a rather strange sparkle of light in my eyes. I guess something extraordinary happens to me when I get inspired, because I seem to have this effect on some people. Like a magnet, they turn and look at me and smile. Mostly it is women who have noticed this spark and are attracted to it, maybe because women generally are more sensitive to things of a spiritual nature than most men, but men can be spiritual as well. One evening, a young couple in their 20s was eating at a restaurant. The girl happened to just look at me. I don't know why, but I felt as if I had known her forever, so I went down on my knees so that I could look straight into her eyes and said, "Hi, I am Joseph. I am a writer and I feel like I should give you this booklet that I wrote, Thoughts on Relationships." She smiled. I talked with them for about 20 minutes, giving them advice on relationships, still on my knees all this time without realizing it. They were so happy to have met me, and also surprised, because that day happened to be her birthday, and not only that, but after they had been separated for several months, it was their first time seeing each other, and they were trying to decide if they should get back into a relationship. The guy kept looking up into the sky to see if perhaps I had just been dropped off from a spaceship somewhere. Later I met two brothers on the beach, John and Alex, and I ended up talking with them for about an hour. I don't know why I ended up telling them the story of my life, but as I was talking with them, I noticed that John's face kept getting brighter and brighter, and had a smile that seemed to be getting bigger and bigger by the hour.